Did you know that one beloved sitcom star shared a home with his partner for nearly 50 years while the cameras never caught a glimpse? Today, we're revealing 10 genuine celebrity relationships that rewrote the rules of discretion. 1. Rock Hudson and Mark Christian. Rock Hudson wasn't just Hollywood's ultimate heartthrob playing opposite Doris Day and Elizabeth Taylor in those glossy romantic comedies. He was living a double life that would eventually become one of the most tragic public reckonings in entertainment history. Behind closed doors, Hudson carried on relationships with men throughout his career, including a significant partnership with Mark Christian that lasted into the 1980s. Christian later testified that Hudson kept his AIDS diagnosis secret from him, sparking a landmark lawsuit that brought the disease into public conversation. The case exposed not just Hudson's private world, but the devastating cost of secrecy in an era that demanded it. Hudson's death in 1985 marked a turning point, forcing America to confront both the AIDS crisis and the human toll of forcing stars into the closet. His mansion in Beverly Hills had been the site of countless hidden gatherings where Hollywood's gay elite could finally breathe freely. The irony cuts deep when Rock's most famous romantic scenes are watched today, knowing the weight he carried between takes. Raymond Burr and Robert Benavides. Perry Mason's courtroom victories made Raymond Burr one of television's most recognizable faces, but his greatest performance happened off-screen. For over 3 decades, Burr shared his life with actor Robert Benavides, building a partnership that remained invisible to most of America. The elaborate deception Burr constructed was masterful and heartbreaking. He invented an entire fictional family, complete with a wife and son who had supposedly died tragically, stories he repeated so often in interviews that some biographers initially believed them. Meanwhile, Benavides worked behind the scenes, eventually becoming a producer and orchid breeder alongside Burr. The two built a vineyard in Sonoma County called Raymond Burr Vineyards, a tangible legacy of their shared life. They traveled the world together, attended industry events as business partners, and cultivated one of Hollywood's longest-lasting relationships while hiding in plain sight. When Burr died in 1993, the full truth emerged, revealing a love story that had endured through Perry Mason's entire 9-season run and beyond. Benavides continued managing their vineyard for years afterward, a quiet guardian of their shared history. Cary Grant and Randolph Scott? This one shook old Hollywood to its core and continues to spark debate among film historians today. Cary Grant and Randolph Scott, two of the era's most dashing leading men, lived together on and off throughout the 1930s and early 1940s. Their beachside bachelor pad became infamous among industry insiders, with the two photographed together in domestic bliss wearing matching outfits and cooking meals side by side. Studios initially promoted these images as charming evidence of male friendship and frugality during the Depression, but the whispers never stopped. Grant married 5 times and Scott married twice, yet they kept returning to each other between marriages. Biographers have argued both sides, some insisting it was purely platonic, while others point to the mountain of circumstantial evidence and period accounts from friends. What's undeniable is the intensity of their bond and the lengths Hollywood went to obscure it. When Paramount finally pressured them to separate residences to quiet the gossip, colleagues reported both men seemed genuinely heartbroken. Their correspondence reveals a devotion that transcends easy categorization. Whether romantic or not, theirs was clearly one of Hollywood's most significant relationships, hidden behind the acceptable mask of male camaraderie. James Dean and Jack Simmons. James Dean burned bright and fast, leaving behind just 3 major films and a legacy of rebellion that defined a generation. What most fans didn't know was that during his meteoric rise, Dean was involved with advertising executive Jack Simmons. Their relationship existed during Dean's final years in New York and early Hollywood period, a time when Dean was still navigating his identity, both as an actor and as a person. Simmons later spoke about their connection, describing Dean as tortured by the impossible standards of masculinity Hollywood demanded. Dean's bisexuality was an open secret among his circle, with relationships involving both men and women. But the studio system worked overtime to craft his image as the ultimate heterosexual rebel. Friends recalled Dean's anguish over having to hide fundamental parts of himself while being celebrated for his authentic performances. Simmons attended Dean's funeral in 1955, but sat unacknowledged among the mourners, his role in Dean's life erased from the official narrative. It took decades before biographers began seriously examining this aspect of Dean's story, and even then, some fans rejected it outright, unable to reconcile the icon with the reality. Sal Mineo and Jill Haworth. Sal Mineo's story is particularly complex because he publicly dated women, including actress Jill Haworth, while privately pursuing relationships with men. Haworth herself later confirmed that their romance was partly for show, a mutual arrangement that benefited both their careers. Mineo, who'd been a teen idol after Rebel Without a Cause, found himself increasingly typecast and struggling as he aged out of youthful roles. His sexuality became an open secret in Hollywood, and work dried up as whispers grew louder. Mineo became one of the first major stars to acknowledge his sexuality before his death, telling a magazine in 1976 that he was bisexual, a staggering act of courage for the time. Tragically, he was murdered just weeks later during a random robbery outside his Los Angeles apartment, at only 37 years old. His openness came too late for true acceptance, but early enough to matter. Haworth remained a friend throughout, later speaking about the impossible pressures gay actors faced and the genuine affection they shared despite their arrangement. Mineo's real relationships with men remained mostly hidden, protected by friends who understood the stakes. This couple represents something even more remarkable than hidden Hollywood romance. They were revolutionaries. Will Geer, later beloved as Grandpa Walton on The Waltons, had a relationship with Harry Hay in the 1930s. Hay would go on to found the Mattachine Society, one of America's first gay rights organizations, making him a pivotal figure in LGBTQ history. Geer, meanwhile, pursued acting while remaining active in leftist political circles, eventually blacklisted during the McCarthy era for his communist ties. His relationship with Hay occurred before Geer's marriage to actress Herta Ware, whom he openly told about his sexuality. Ware accepted it, and they raised 3 children together while Geer maintained involvement in both gay rights and progressive causes. The marriage later ended, but Geer remained connected to activist communities until his death in 1978. What makes this story extraordinary is how Geer managed to exist in multiple worlds simultaneously, never fully closeted within his circles, but never publicly out either. Hay's own journey from hidden lover of a Hollywood actor to founder of the gay rights movement shows how personal relationships sparked larger social change. Their story intersects Hollywood glamour with genuine revolutionary politics, a rare combination. 7. Montgomery Clift and Jack Larson. Montgomery Clift's tortured genius is well documented, but his relationship with actor Jack Larson is less known outside Hollywood circles. Larson, who played Jimmy Olsen on the original Superman television series, was part of Clift's inner circle during his most troubled years. Friends describe their connection as deeply intimate, though both men also had relationships with women at various points. Clift struggled intensely with his sexuality, living in a time when exposure could mean career death. His famous car accident in 1956 left him physically scarred and increasingly dependent on alcohol and prescription drugs. Larson stood by him through the worst of it, part of a small group of friends including Elizabeth Taylor, who tried desperately to help Clift survive himself. The two attended parties together in Hollywood's underground gay scene, private gatherings where stars could briefly drop their masks. Larson later became a successful playwright after leaving acting, and he spoke more openly about his sexuality in later decades. He described Clift as the love of his life, a brilliant talent destroyed by an industry and society that couldn't accept him. When Clift died in 1966 at just 45, Larson was devastated, later preserving Clift's memory through his own writing and interviews. 8. George Nader and Mark Miller. Here's a love story that actually got its happy ending, rare for this era. George Nader was a rising star in the 1950s, the kind of square-jawed leading man studios loved. But as rumors about his sexuality grew, Hollywood turned cold and work dried up. Rather than fight it, Nader made a choice that was radical for its time. He walked away from American stardom and moved to Europe with his partner, Mark Miller, beginning a relationship that would last over 50 years. Miller was also an actor, and together they built a life far from Hollywood's judging eyes. Nader found new success in Germany, becoming a star of the Kommissar X film series. The two eventually settled down, and Nader turned to writing science fiction novels. What's remarkable is their openness within their chosen community and the longevity of their partnership in an era when such relationships were supposed to be impossible. When Nader died in 2002, Miller survived him by only 7 years, heartbroken. Nader had named Miller as his heir, and their relationship was finally acknowledged publicly. It remains one of old Hollywood's most enduring love stories, proof that happiness was possible for those brave enough to step outside the system. Deviak Liberace and Scott Thorson. Liberace's relationship with Scott Thorson became one of Hollywood's most sensational scandals when Thorson sued for palimony in 1982, dragging the flamboyant pianist's private life into courtrooms and headlines. Liberace had spent his entire career denying his sexuality, despite the sequins, the candelabras, and the obvious camp of his performances. His public image balanced on the knife edge of being flamboyant enough to entertain but maintaining plausible deniability. Thorson, 40 years younger, claimed they'd been lovers for 5 years and that Liberace had even tried to adopt him to cement their legal connection. The lawsuit exposed not just their relationship, but the elaborate measures Liberace took to hide it, including allegedly having Thorson undergo plastic surgery to look more like him. The case became a media circus, with Liberace vehemently denying everything while Thorson provided increasingly detailed testimony. Eventually, they settled out of court, but the damage was done. Liberace's carefully constructed public persona crumbled, though he never publicly acknowledged the truth. When he died in 1987 from complications related to AIDS, his death certificate initially listed a different cause, one final act of concealment. Thorson's later memoir provided even more details about their tumultuous relationship, painting a picture of a man trapped between his authentic self and his public image. 10. Kerwin Matthews and Tom Nichol. Kerwin Matthews was the heroic lead in fantasy adventures, like The Seventh Voyage of Sinbad, charming audiences with his swashbuckling style. But when Hollywood moved on from sword and sandal epics, Matthews made a quiet exit from the spotlight and built something more valuable than fame. He moved to San Francisco and lived openly with his partner, Tom Nichol, for over 40 years. Their relationship existed far from Hollywood's glare, in a city that offered more freedom and acceptance. Friends remembered them as a devoted couple who found genuine happiness by stepping away from an industry that would never have let them be themselves. Matthews never sought publicity in his later years, content with the life he'd built. He and Nichol traveled, entertained friends, and enjoyed the kind of ordinary domestic happiness that had been impossible during Matthews' acting career. When Matthews died in 2007, Nichol was by his side, having shared more than 4 decades together. Their story represents the path many chose, trading fame for authenticity, spotlight for genuine love. It's a reminder that sometimes the bravest thing Hollywood stars could do was simply walk away and live honestly, even if it meant obscurity. These 10 couples remind us that love existed even when society demanded silence, that genuine partnerships flourished behind the studio system's manufactured romances. Which of these stories surprised you most? Do you think modern celebrities face similar pressures, or has Hollywood truly changed? Drop your thoughts in the comments and tell us which classic Hollywood couple's real story you want exposed next. And here's the real question. Were audiences complicit in forcing these stars to hide, or were they victims of the same system? Let's debate this in the comments, because this conversation is far from over.